Even before tonight's big Washington Post story that Donald Trump revealed classified information to Russian diplomats, the Trump White House was widely reported to be in chaos. Take this Axios report from late in the weekend that Trump is considering a huge reboot, with one confidant saying he's frustrated and angry at everyone. A separate report in Politico today describes a White House where aides deliberately exploit fake news articles to trick President Trump. But the reports out tonight are that it was Trump himself, not his staff, driving this crisis with the odd disclosure of classified material to Russian adversaries, which has the Senate Foreign Relations Chair, Senator Bob Corker, concerned about two words: spiral and chaos.
Obviously, they're, downward spiral right now and have got to figure out a way to come to grips with all that's happening. The chaos that is being created by the lack of discipline is creating an environment that I think makes it creates a worrisome environment.
Joining me now is Josh Earnest, the former White House press secretary under President Obama and an analyst for us, and Neera Tanden, president of the Center for American Progress and a former aide to Hillary Clinton. Josh, is it time to worry?
Good evening, Ari. I think this latest revelation is deeply concerning. You have the President of the United States who either is so undisciplined that he doesn't know how to keep a secret, or is in some ways so desperate to impress the Russian foreign minister and the Russian ambassador that he feels like he has to brag about the information that is presented to him every day. And that would be worrisome enough. We're actually talking about information that has real consequences for the American people. We've heard senior administration officials from the Trump administration already talk about how grave the threat is to our civil aviation system from this threat emanating from ISIL. This is precisely the threat that Trump was discussing. This is precisely the intelligence stream that is keeping the American people safe right now.
Right, and let me ask you this: the Washington Post has this reporting, and then here's some of the response, Josh, from inside the White House. Communication staff at the White House, quote, hiding in their offices. This is according to a senior Trump aide, as a gaggle of White House press stormed hallways after the Post story broke Monday night. That's tonight. Quote, do not ask me how this story looks. We all know how this looks, the senior aide told the Daily Beast. The aide described a scene at the White House as tense and as a morgue. Is that a scene that you ever saw in your time in the White House?
That does not ring true to me, Ari, in terms of what my experience was in the White House. I think most White Houses, and this is true of Democratic and Republican White Houses, and this is a phrase that was coined by Harry Truman, that the buck stops here. But when it comes to President Trump, he keeps passing the buck on to other people. He has these self-inflicted crises that he then blames on staff. These are precisely the people who then are responsible for going and cleaning up after him. And whether that means General McMaster or someone on his staff having to call the CIA director and the director of the NSA to tell him that the president screwed up, or it's senior members of the president's communication team, Sean Spicer, Sarah Sanders, or Kellyanne Conway, having to go and face the media to try to justify or rationalize or explain away an irresponsible action by the President of the United States.
Neera, the president, as a candidate, said he would run the government like a business. And it was observed then that many of his businesses went bankrupt and ceased to exist. Do you feel that we're seeing, to some degree, the bankrupting of core parts of the White House operations, or is that a bridge too far?
I think this is more worrisome than running the government like a business, or thinking you're a CEO instead of a president. The information that came out today really shows the President of the United States essentially threatening our national security by ensuring that allies will think twice, 3 times, or never even give us information that may be important to keep Americans safe. So at the end of the day, the President of the United States, who is charged with keeping America safe from foreign threats, decided to share information with a foreign adversary, either to brag or do something else. I mean, let's remember, we only know about his meeting with Ambassador Kislyak, who is at the center of the Russia investigation. Mike Flynn called him, Jeff Sessions talked to him. He's at the center of this. We only know this because Russian media reported it out. He did not even inform our press about this. This meeting that he had was quite a doozy. Josh said it's worrisome, and whether, we should be worried. I think worried is an understatement for what Americans should be at what's happened today.
Well, and Neera,
happened this past week at the White House.
Neera, speak to Russia, because we're going to put the photos back up. When we put up the photos here of the president with those officials, viewers will notice in the upper corner, according to the accreditation we always do, we have to credit the Russian government, because those are the only available photos of this meeting. I mean, is something beyond wrong here?
The American media was not informed that the President of the United States was meeting with the Russian ambassador, who Mike Flynn lied about talking to. Jeff Sessions misled the Congress. Seems like he lied in talking to Kislyak. This is the person who is, again, at the center of what the Russia investigation is about. The president chose to meet with him last week, didn't inform the American media, and we only know at the courtesy of Russian media, who got a lot of mileage. The Russians got a lot of mileage out of this meeting, apparently, because now they have information from a core ally in which they can discern things that they should never be able to discern from us.
And Josh, it's easy with Donald Trump to get caught up in his energy, his attitude, and reactions to him that are often obviously of a polarized nature. I would observe that this is a disturbing story that merits attention if it happened by any president. And I want to read to you the Speaker of the House, who happens to be a Republican's response, because it shows how I think nonpartisan the concern is. Quote, "We have no way to know what was said, but protecting our nation's secret is paramount. The Speaker hopes for a full explanation of the facts from the administration." That is not a statement, Josh, if you could decode it for us, that says, oh, we take the National Security Advisor at his word, or this is a done deal, closed issue. It suggests that the facts themselves are in doubt tonight.
Well, Ari, it also suggests there aren't too many Republicans that are ready to leap to President Trump's defense in this particular situation. And the truth is, his conduct in this situation, if what the Washington Post is reporting is true, is indefensible. I can tell you, based on my experience in the Obama White House, I can tell you about the extensive work that went in on a staff level to prepare the president in advance of a meeting with foreign leaders. And it's not because President Obama was unaware of the issues. It's because it reflected just how important those meetings are and those communications are. And it would include cabinet-level officials like secretaries of state or the National Security Advisor, but it would also include subject matter experts from a variety of agencies. So this is something that on the front end required a lot of investment of the staff's time to make sure that the president was prepared for the meeting. In the Trump administration, the work apparently comes on the back end in cleaning up the president's mistakes from the meeting. That's a situation that is deeply harmful to our national security, or at least threatening to our national security. And you even have Republicans now on Capitol Hill who are in a situation where they don't really want to be responsible for answering for it either. And you can't really blame them.
Right, and to your point, it may bum people out, but the fact is it's the National Security Advisor tonight that's being pulled into what some are calling, what I think you referred to as potentially the spin rather than the facts. We're going to keep reporting on the facts and try to get to the bottom of it, but that part is concerning as well. Former White House official Josh Earnest, thank you.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.